Hey guys, and welcome to the Lower Chesapeake Bay Fishing Report, the first podcast to bring you the local offshore, nearshore, and inshore fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. We got a great fishing report lined up for you guys this week, but first let's hear who's making the show possible. GreatDaysOutdoors.com. Great Days Outdoors has been the premier destination for hunters and anglers looking for a comprehensive look into the outdoor lifestyle since 1997. Our stories are crafted by dedicated journalists who live, eat, and breathe all things hunting, fishing, conservation, and land ownership. Check them out at GreatDaysOutdoors.com. Listen up, folks. AFTCO has a new promotion for all Great Days Outdoors Podcast Network listeners. They're now offering a camo sunglasses cleaner cloth with any purchase of AFTCO products. I especially enjoy their hooded sun protection shirts, as well as their Seiko fluorocarbon. All you got to do to get your coupon code is text LCBFR to 779-345-2918. Again, just text the letters LCBFR to 779-345-2918 to get subscribed to our email list, and we'll send you the promo code via email. All right, guys, I appreciate y'all joining me this week. I am your host, Luke Barton. It's been a beautiful day here in Virginia Beach, and this show, it's a new addition to the Great Days Outdoors Podcast Network, and the purpose of this show is to bring a weekly offshore, nearshore, and inshore fishing report to anglers in our area, connecting folks with local charter guides that will be contributing their local knowledge each week about what's happening in our local waters. We also want this platform to promote sustainable fishing practices to preserve this world-class fishery for the next generation. All right, guys, welcome back. We are bringing back Captain Jake Bolts with the Flying Fish Sport Fishing. Captain Jake, how are we?
Great, man. How are you?
Doing good, man. I saw on y'all's Facebook, y'all did something kind of unique. It wasn't necessarily fishing this past week. So I want to dive into that. It looks like you guys did some sort of research trip. What'd y'all do?
Yeah, so we have this group that's, believe this is the third time we've taken them out, and they're actually subcontracted by the Navy, and they do whale research. So they basically pay us to go out there, and they send us a specific coordinate they want us to start at. And the whole time on the way out, they're in the binoculars, and we slow down at their coordinates. Whenever they see a whale, it's like, go over that way. Let's go check this whale out. So basically what they're trying to do is, first things first, we see a whale, we get over there, they take thousands of pictures of one whale, try to get, every angle, because they all have, unique markings, and they take those and they have a catalog of all these whales they've seen before and try to match it up or match it up with some other, research group up the coast. And after that, if the whale's cooperative, which is, usually a very slim portion of the time, we try to idle alongside, and they actually put a satellite tag in them, which they shoot out of a crossbow, and it goes like right, in their dorsal fin. That way, when the dorsal fin breaks the surface, it can send a signal to the satellite, and they can track all its movements up and down the coast. And when they do that, they also like to take a tissue sample, so they hit it with another kind of thing, which kind of just pricks them a little bit, and it pops out, and we go, retrieve it, and it's got a little tissue sample from the whale. And then, you just kind of rinse and repeat every time. And then, well, like I said, a lot of the whales don't let you tag them, but we do whales, and 10% of them let us tag them.
Man, I got so many questions. Like, first of all, how close are you getting to these whales?
Oh man, I mean, you could jump on them. So when we're tagging them, he puts on a headset, I put on a headset, and he's kind of directing me, and I'm trying to, just pace this whale and time it with when he, gets his dorsal fin out of the water so he can shoot it. And most of the times when he shoots it and he sees it go in, he's like, all right, neutral, back up. That way we don't, injure the whale in any way. You're getting that close. I mean, you have to be 10, 20 feet away from the whale. You're not very far.
Yeah, no, I mean, no pressure, right? Just don't hurt the whale. And also, if you thought there was pressure, like putting a boat in the right spot to throw it like a cobia or something, like, hey, I need to shoot this whale with a crossbow. Please get me in the right spot.
Yeah, I even told those people that that's some of the hardest boat driving I've ever done, is trying to chase these whales and get upright, because for them to shoot it, you have to be basically perpendicular to the whale, with his dorsal fin, because the tag only goes in if you hit it completely, perpendicular. he's looking for a very sweet spot. And most of the time I'm like, come on, shoot it already. And he's like, nope, nope, not yet. But definitely test your driving skills.
Yeah, what was his accuracy like? Like how many did he shoot and how many did he hit?
He was 2 for 2 the last time we went out. I mean, we saw probably 30 or 40 whales, and we only tried to tag a few that let us get close. But he doesn't shoot. I feel like he doesn't shoot unless he's 100% positive. Because, like I said, I've been out on 3 trips, and every time he's shot that crossbow, he hasn't missed.
And I imagine the sea state has a lot to do with it. Are they picking their day with you based on like a specific?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They call me, a day, 2, maybe 3 days in advance at most, because they need a basically a slick calm day. And we were very fortunate the other day with slick calm, so it's ideal.
Yeah.
And they're very, very good at what they do. They have that whole thing dialed in. They do it a lot, so it's go with them.
Do you remember the name of the organization that they're with, or where the research is going to?
They have a Facebook page.
Okay.
I can give it to you later and put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll drop it in the show notes. And then if anybody listening wants to check it out, go to the Fly and Fish Sport Fishing Facebook page, and you've got some incredible photos of these whales. What kind of whales were they?
So that day we saw a lot of humpbacks, a lot of fin whales, and then I might butcher this one. I believe they're called sei whales, SEI. And like I said, we probably saw 30 or 40 in total. At one point, we had 6 or 7 humpbacks swimming beside the boat, and very, very close range. And there was more just, all off. But
That's amazing.
later in the summertime, when all those whales kind of migrate north, they switch over to tracking sperm whales, which are out there in 1,000 fathoms, 80 miles off the coast. And that's a whole different animal than doing what we did the other day with, I guess the baleen whales is what the correct term is.
Okay. And is that a reference to like a certain proximity, off the coast or?
So where we saw those whales the other day, we were inside of 100 fathoms, like the canyon, and then inshore.
Mm-hmm.
Won't find those sperm whales. You have to go 10 miles past, the shelf drop off to find those things. They're in the real deep water.
Yeah. And earlier you mentioned about how they are taking all these pictures so that they can then cross-reference against a database. And I'm looking at this one picture that I guess this gentleman, Bill Woods, tagged y'all in, where the whale's tail is out of the water as it's taking a dive, and you can see the white underside of the tail. And there are some very specific and unique design or patterns, markings, whatever you want to call them under there. So I can see how it would be like matching up almost like a DNA sample to say, hey, we've seen this exact pattern on this whale, whatever, New England or whatnot. So that's pretty cool.
They have different groups up and down the coast. One of the whales that we saw last week, a group from Turks and Caicos actually replied to ours and said that they had down there in the wintertime. So,
oh, wow.
Same whale. So it's, like I said, it's pretty neat. And a lot of these people have, a name for the whale based on some marking they have, and they make some funny name or some neat name. And it's like, oh, yep, we've seen her however many times for the last 6 years, whatever. It's really cool.
That is really cool. Yeah, I see it right here. It's I guess they give them like a number and letter naming. So this one is TCI, Tango Charlie Indigo 48, and it's the folks were tagging y'all from the Turks and Caicos Islands Whale Project. So that's really cool, man. That's a ways away. That's got to be several hundred miles.
Yeah, that's a long ways away. Yeah, so it's pretty incredible how far they travel, and I guess most of those end up, off the coast of Maine or somewhere up of Canada in the later summer before they come back down.
Mm-hmm. So, Jake, when you guys were heading offshore in that slick calm, how painful was it to not be dragging some dredges or tuna teasers or something? Did you guys see any other life while you were out there?
We saw some bass and sharks, and the whales were feeding on a lot of bait. I think that's why there were so many in one area. There was tons of bait down there, about 100 foot. And I won't lie, we did slip out a couple of spreader bars for as long as we could. There was so many whales. It was we were pretty busy. On a slower day, you can troll around pretty good, but there were so many whales, it was hard to slip out any baits. But we did for a little while, but no bites.
I hear you. Well, and I know there hasn't really been too much of a tuna bite up our way just yet. It seems like most of that's still happening a little bit down south off the Carolinas. But talk to us a little bit about some of the fishing trips you guys have done this past week and what we've got coming up.
Yeah, so we started our sea bass season, and we've done a couple of sea bass trips where anywhere from fishing 20 to 35 miles off the coast. And then one day last week, we did do a deep drop trip. So we were all the way out there at the canyon. And also a slick, calm day. There was no movement, which when you're bottom fishing out there, you kind of want a little bit of movement. Fishing was a little bit on the slower side, I won't lie. We did end up catching our limit of 30 blue line tiles, but it took a lot longer than usual. And then we ran back inshore and sea bass fish, caught our limit of sea bass. And that was our first, full offshore trip. And then I just got back in from a sea bass trip a couple hours ago today, caught a nice limit of bass, and doing the same thing again tomorrow. And then Friday and Saturday, we're supposed to be chasing tunas for the first time this year. Hopefully there's some around within distance that we can find. Like you said, a lot of them are still down there. From what I was told today, where the tunas were at, 95 mile run from here. It's a pretty good clip, but it looks like there may be some water trying to move in within a reasonable distance. We'll see. We got to keep looking at the SST charts this week and see what happens. But
as an uneducated offshore fisherman, to say waiting for the water to move in, like, what does that really mean?
You're just waiting. Right now it's a lot of the same. If you look at a chart, an SST chart, looking at your temps, it's just a flat temperature. I think right now it's probably 60, 61 degrees out there. But it doesn't change. There's no temperature change over a far stretch of water. So what we're looking for is some kind of finger or eddy, whatever you want to call it, coming off the Gulf Stream to give us a little bit warmer water. Normally, 66 is what you look for at a minimum. Anywhere between 66 and 70 is what it's like in the early season for the tunas. Like I said, it looks like there might be something trying to spin in down there around the 000s. We'll have to keep an eye on it the next couple of days. But yeah, other than that, man, it's the water hasn't been great. There was a couple of tunas caught above us in Ocean City. They had a little bit of water up there, but not much. They're complaining just like we are.
And I mean, hey, that's part of this show. We want to talk about it, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. And sometimes it hangs between, bad and ugly. And you slid in a terminology there that made me have to think for a second. You said, the SST charts, and I'm assuming, I don't want to be wrong here. Is that sea surface temp charts, SST?
Temperature, you are right.
All right, yeah, I'm learning as we go here, but I've got a picture pulled up here from y'all's deep drop trip. So talk me through. So I see a big limit of what looks like blue line tiles, and then some really nice class of sea bass, which I'm sure those are a ton of fun to clean, about 1 billion fish that size. And then what are these long skinny things I see up here? They look like gigantic eels.
They are. So we catch those from time to time. We're not obviously targeting them, but for anyone who doesn't know, a lot of people think they're trash. But if you cut one of those things open and you fillet it off, that is some of the prettiest white meat you will ever see in your life, and it is delicious.
I think I speak for all the cobia fishermen out here when I say the thought of eating an eel just makes me want to hurl. So this is really good to eat.
You got to get past the visual, but man, it really is good. I was a doubter myself until someone told me, hey, just watch me clean this thing and look at it. And I was like, man, that meat does look really good. And I tried it, and it's good. Like I said, we're not targeting them, but if they come up, it's like, hey, it's good eating. You don't want to throw it back.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, when you hook into one of those things, you think you snagged to the bottom.
Oh, do they fight hard?
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's more so of a fight rather than, a lot of dead weight, but it's hard getting them up to the surface. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, just eyeballing, was one of those things weigh about 11 pounds?
Yeah, 10 pounds, I'd say. I mean, we catch some inshore, on the sea bass spots. Those ones were off the sea bass spots, actually, that are a little smaller. And then on the wrecks out there in the deeper water and, 300-400 foot of water, we've caught some absolute monsters. Like I said, you would think you are hung up on the bottom, but you just have a giant eel.
So for these blue line tiles, the deep dropping for those, it looks like, the blue line tiles and those 2 eels were what you caught in the deep. So how far out were you for those, and were you guys dropping down with electric reels? What was the setup for targeting those blue lines?
Yeah, we were all the way, 65 miles out around the canyon, a little bit north of the canyon, fishing anywhere from like 280, 350 foot for those is kind of where I like to be. And we have some groups that like to use the electric, some groups that like to use the hand crank, and a lot of groups that like to use the hand crank, and then after about 30 minutes go to the electric reels. And that's kind of what happened last week. And I was trying to scout a couple spots. So when you're scouting a spot, you don't want to drop all that way and, reel up for nothing. So we'll drop the electric reels first. And if you get a couple bites, then I'll say, all right, drop the hand cranks.
Hmm.
And that way, you're not wasting your time or your energy. But it's a little mix of both. A lot of times we'll have one guy using electric and two or three guys using a hand crank.
Hmm. And I'm not real familiar with blue line or what they like to eat, So what's our tackle setup, and then what's the bait of choice that those guys really like to go after?
I mean, we use pretty simple 2 or 3 hooks. Using a circle hook, I'd say, 6, 7/0 circle hook. And we just use squid, cut bluefish, kind of the same bait you use for sea bass, just
Okay.
on a bigger scale, a little bit bigger cuts. I know some people like to use a ton of hooks. Me personally, I don't put any more than 3 on there. And we use anywhere from 80 to 100 pound tests, just because if you do hook 2 really big ones, you're going to want some heavier tackle. We have broken some off before on the lighter stuff. So we've gone heavier over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, looking at these pictures here, some of those fish look like they're a solid, 8 plus, maybe even 10 plus pounds on some of those bigger blue lines.
I think the biggest one we had that day was 7 or 8 pounds.
Okay.
And it was on the slower side. Normally, on a normal day, we'll catch a couple citations, which citation blue line is 10 pounds. We've caught them up to, I believe, 19 pounds is our biggest. And
Wow.
on a good day, we'll have 5 or 6 citations, anywhere between 10 and 15 pounds on an average day. And like I said, that day was just a little slower. It happened, but any day you get a limit, can't complain too much.
Yeah, and what is a limit on those blue lines?
So they're a little bit different. It's a different keep for recreational charter, and then a headboat even has a different one. I believe the headboat's 7 or 8 a person. I don't know what they're able to keep. Us, we're allowed 5 a person as a charter boat, and then the recreational guys are allowed 3 apiece.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean, they look like a tasty fish. I know there's another species of tile. What's that? The
Golden tile.
golden tile. So between a blue line and a golden tile, which bring it to the table, which one is your preference to eat?
It's pretty tough. I would say if I had to choose golden tile, I'd make a comparison to lobster on a golden tile. Blue line, don't get me wrong, is absolutely delicious, and I could eat it every day of the week. But golden tile, I don't know, it's something about it.
A little more special.
But they are definitely a little harder to catch.
Yeah, I don't see a whole lot popping up on, the social feeds. It seems like it's a little bit more of an illustrious fish to go out there and find. And speaking of finding those fish, to target sea bass, we've been talking about sea bass a bit lately. You can go out to some of these named wrecks and maybe explore around a little bit. For blue line tile, you're out there 60, 65 miles, around the canyon area. What are you looking for on the bottom machine? How do you decide where to start looking and dropping for blue lines?
Well, like I said, they have a targeted depth that they kind of stay at. I mean, there is exceptions. I've caught them deeper, but mostly I look between 280 and 400 foot is where I'm looking. And some days I'll just drive around and wait till I get a little bit of a mark down there on the bottom of my bottom machine, and I'll throw the boat in neutral and drop down. And that's how I've found some of my good spots. But generally, they say you want a little bit of a softer, muddier bottom for the tile fish. But like I said, you just got to look around, try different places. It's not like they're holding to a certain structure or a named place. It's just you got to go out there and put your time in.
And look around. So it sounds like my choices are to either spend a lot of money on gas or spend a little bit of money on a charter with flying fish and get out there with you guys and get hooked on some of these blue line tiles. And before we get to asking about how to get booked with you guys, I saw some other pictures that you guys did a little more inshore. Did y'all get into a slew of those school red drum?
We did. So we had a group that had a 6-hour trip, and we started off spade fishing. The spade fishing didn't really work out for us, so we did inshore wrecks, and we ended up catching a couple of sea bass on the inshore wrecks, but it wasn't great. So we ended up coming back in. I was like, we'll do some trolling. Trolled all the way in from offshore. And when we made it in there, the drum finally popped up, and we pulled all the trolling stuff in. Took us a couple times to get right on it. And I kind of got away from the big fleet of boats that was hanging on this one school. And me and another boat found a really big school off to ourselves for the time being, anyway. And we were able to pluck away as many as we wanted there for a while. And we actually had hung it up, and I was just, easing the boat home at 7 knots. We were only, I think, 1.5 miles, 2 miles from home. And I got about 3/4 of a mile from the inlet, and I looked over, and there was another school of drums. So I looked down. I said, "You guys want to reel in one more?" And they said, "Absolutely." So we pulled over there and hooked 3 more. And when we hooked the third one, I looked up, and there was a nice pair of cobias sitting right on top of the drum. But at that point, I was out of bucktails. We had all our rods hooked up, so I just had to watch them swim on by. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. They really enjoyed it. Said it was their best fishing trip ever. So, those drum really make the day some days. We're very happy to have them.
Yeah, coming in from any sort of a fishing trip and then just getting that extra cherry on top to go whack a couple of drum. I mean, I've caught some of those drum, and that is a fun fight. They pull so hard and they eat so hard, and it's explosive. And like you were saying, you can get 4 or 5 hooked up at a time, and it's just pure chaos. But it's also so much fun.
It truly was chaos. Yeah, at one point we had 3 hooked up, and I was looking all around the boat. We were surrounded, and looked in front of the boat, and there was another 500 yards of them stretched out off the bow. I was like, oh my goodness, there must be 5,000 fish sitting right here.
That's awesome. Well, we're gonna ask about how we can get booked with you guys, but I also want to put a little teaser out there for the future. Jake and I have been talking a little bit about their Starlink capability, and we're probably going to try in the next couple of weeks recording while you're offshore using Starlink for your broadband connection, and maybe we'll do it with the video cameras on so we can see what's going on, and we can throw that one up on YouTube or something. I think that would just be really cool, just to say we did it.
Pretty neat.
Yeah. So like we were saying, if folks want to get up with you, Captain Jake, on the flying fish and book to go chase some redfish or to go deep dropping or sea bass, and what's going to be the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with me is to call me. My number is 757-769-9545. I like everyone to call me and discuss options first before we book a trip. Other than that, you can go flyingfishsportfishing.com. I have a book now button right there at the bottom of my website. If you see a trip you like, know you want to do it, hit book now, and it'll have my available dates, and select whatever you want. And yep, that's it. You don't even have to talk to me. Just select the trip.
Just go. Everybody loves to online shop these days, get some Grubhub to the house, all that jazz. And then for those that have just tuned in for the first time and gotten to listen to you talk a little bit about what you guys do, remind folks out there what kind of boat we're fishing on if we book with Flying Fish.
Oh, it's a 43 Cabo fly bridge. So we have an upper level where I drive from, and then down here in the salon, couches, AC, bathrooms, microwave, fridges. It's a nice setup. Especially now it's starting to get really hot. People today definitely took advantage of the AC. You get out of the heat for a while. Yeah, it's a nice setup. It really is.
That's awesome. Well, they say you can't catch them on the couch, but it sounds like in the case of flying fish, you might be catching them from the couch in the salon. But jokes aside, Captain Jake, thank you so much for that report. It was awesome to hear about what's going on offshore with those whales and that research and the deep drop bite. Folks, we're going to take a quick break. Y'all stick around. Hilton's offshore charts. The days of heading out and blindly looking for good fishing areas are pretty much over. Don't waste time and money on fuel searching for fish. You need the most recent, highest resolution images to not only know where to go, but where not to go. The knowledge provided by today's technology is critical when planning an offshore fishing trip. So make the choice that professional captains all over the East Coast make and choose Hilton's Real-Time Navigator. The easy-to-use interface and excellent customer service will have you on the fish every time you go. Check them out at hiltonsoffshore.com. That's hiltonsoffshore.com. All right, guys, we are going to talk fishing tournaments. Unfortunately, Captain Sean Shapiro had so many fish to clean. He has just been absolutely annihilating some fishing. I think they've been catching loads of sea bass. I know they've caught some cobias and some redfish. A little tight timeline this week, so we're going to just talk a little bit briefly about Big Man's Cobia Bonanza, which is coming up this year, August the 15th through the 17th. And Captain Shapiro on See Me Sport Fishing, he is going to be hosting the tournament this year. He has been a tournament winner in years past, and he and his dad have done an amazing job with Bayview Event Space, which is where the captain meeting will be held. Then we're going to have the scales are going to be at Cobb's Marina, and then we're going to have the awards party at Bayview Events as well. It's a cool space over there in Ocean View area. And they're going to have it all tricked out so we can have a good time and some good eats and good drinks. And it looks like in 2023, they paid out over $75,000 in winnings So just a quick recap. You guys can find this on Facebook if you look for Big Man's Kobe Bonanza. They're on Instagram as well. But it's a 2-day tournament and based on 55 entries at $300 a day. First place will pay out $10,000. Second place, $3,500. And third place, $1,500. And then we're going to have multiple levels of Calcutta. For those of you not familiar with Calcuttas, it's basically, typically a 1, a 3, a 500. Sometimes there's a brown bag special. And you got to be in those each level in order to be in the next level. And then if you catch the biggest fish in that category, cha-ching, payday. So that's a little bit about the tournament format. There's going to be a lot more, tournament rules and specifics coming up as we get closer to the event. But I want you guys to be thinking about either entering into this tournament. It's always a great time, or there are plenty of sponsorship opportunities. We've got a couple different levels here. We'll just go over them really quick. We've got title sponsors at $2,000. We've got diamond sponsor at $1,500. Gold sponsor at $1,000, silver sponsor at $500, and then a bronze banner sponsor at $250. And each level is going to carry different values and benefits as far as exposure for your brand or your business logo, etc. You'll be able to get, at some levels, boat entries, tickets to the after party, tournament T-shirts, get your company logo hung on banners, get the opportunity to put some of your company swag in the tournament buckets. And I can say this, I fish these tournaments every single year, and it's always a great turnout with tons of local anglers and business owners and boat owners. And you just can't get a better group of guys together than being at a cobia tournament. So if you have a boat and you like to cobia fish, this is the tournament for you. If you've got a business or a service that caters to anglers or fishermen or boat owners, business owners in any way, this could be a great sponsorship opportunity. So on behalf of Captain Sean Shapiro and See Me, who's going to be hosting, we would like to extend a warm welcome to anyone that would like to join us for the event or for becoming a sponsor. You can reach out to Captain Sean at seanshapiro07@gmail.com. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor or getting registered for the tournament. Again, that's Sean Shapiro, ShawnShapiro07@gmail.com to get more information about sponsorship. So, folks, that's going to wrap up that brief segment talking about this upcoming exciting tournament. We're going to take a quick break and check out this week's sponsor. Killer Dock. Most fishermen clean their fish on something like an unsightly old wooden table or the top of a cooler, somewhere that is not comfortable, not sanitary, and not attractive. Killer Dock makes the greatest fish cleaning station known to mankind. They are built from marine-grade aluminum and are corrosion-resistant clear-coated to protect it from the harsh salt environment. Killer Dock makes tables and canopies at several different sizes. So whatever you need on your dock, deck, or patio, they have a fish cleaning station for you. Check out killerdock.com to see more. All right, guys, we're going to jump into an inshore report here with Captain Jack Limroth on King Tide Charters. Jack, welcome to the show. How you doing, bud?
Doing well, Luke. How you doing?
Good, man. I've been following your stories and your fishing journey for several years. But I know, besides fishing, something pretty monumentous just happened in your life. Tell us a little bit about what's been going on with you, and then we're going to jump into some fish stories.
Yeah, so last week finished up in Charlottesville, graduated from University of Virginia last week. Excited to be finished. It was fun through COVID. Been a wild ride, but lucky to be back working here, starting at Merrill Lynch in July. So I'll be fishing every day until then.
Awesome, man. Congratulations. I know going through college is a lot of work and so is running a charter business. So kudos to you, man, for getting that done. But I'm ready to talk about some fishing, man. I know you guys had a couple of wild days over the past week. So, but before we jump into those fishing, tell us a little bit about your boat and what you specialize in.
Yeah, so I run a 25 Seahawk yellow. It's got King Tide on the back. It's a solid boat. When I first got it, it had a one-person tower on the top, which we have since upgraded to a more wide, spacey tower with a nice bench in it. Got a 2014 four-stroke 225 Suzuki. Thing is sweet. Had a few issues with it over the years, but all in all, it's been great. Love the boat. If anybody out there's a Seahawk owner, if you've got the 25, it beats you up pretty bad on the way out, but once you get there, that 9.6 beam holds you pretty good. So I love it. It's great for the bay. It gets a little tricky trying to go in the ocean sometimes with the bigger waves, but for what we do around here, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, a 9.6 beam on a 25-foot boat, that's a solid platform to be fishing from.
Oh yeah.
All right, so I know you guys have been doing a little bit of Kobe and red drum lately. For the listeners out there, we've had this migration happening, here in this early mid part of May. But the other day, you guys had a ridiculous day. So I just want to hear all about this day. I want to hear this total number of fish caught. I just want all the details because it was just epic to watch on Instagram.
Yeah, so I guess for starters, so every year kind of varies, a week or two here and there, but somewhere I like to say around May 15th, we follow it on Instagram as they come up from the Outer Banks and try and time it perfectly, looking at the water temps and the winds and seeing which days we think they're going to move up. And I've been really fortunate the last few years to hit some of the first ones that have come across the border. I know 2 years ago we had a day where we caught 38, and this year luckily we were able to top it with 43 on May whatever last Wednesday was. It was pretty epic. I mean, there was just a strong push of fish. I talked to a lot of people that were, 15, 20, 25 fish. I think we stayed out a little longer than everybody just to try and pump up some numbers, but it was a solid push of fish.
That just is crazy. 43 cobias in one day. I mean, talk me through. It's like, what time did you start fishing and what time did you stop fishing?
Yeah, so we pulled out of the dock. My mate William Bloomdahl and I, we pulled out at about 9:30, I think, and headed north out of Rudy. And we saw a few fish in the morning. And usually on those migration days, they're kind of either all up or they're all down. So I think in the first 30 minutes, we caught two and had seen probably 6 or 7. And I looked at him and we were kind of thinking, if this keeps up, it could be a pretty good day. And I got a call from my buddy John, who goes out of Rudy. He was just south and he said he started seeing a few pods. So at about 10 o'clock, 10:30, we pumped south and started looking, and we didn't turn around until I picked up Travis. I picked Travis up around 1 o'clock. I think we had 18 by 1 and picked him up, and we fished till 4 o'clock or so and then turned around. That southeast picked up pretty good. But yeah, we had 18, picked him up, and I think we put 25 more in the boat after we picked up Travis.
So what I'm hearing you say is Jack and King Tide was able to catch 18, but once they picked up Travis Kemp from
Once we picked up
Foolproof, then the numbers just exploded.
Yeah, that's what everyone likes to say. Travis likes to think that. We love
Travis and Foolproof, man. Travis is a great fisherman. I know he worked hard to build his boat as well, which is also a Seahawk, if I'm not incorrect.
No,
right?
I think he's got a Southern Cross.
Southern Cross, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful boat as well. Similar 26, 10-foot beam. All right. So you mentioned earlier you headed north out of Rudy, and I know you don't fish out of Rudy all year long. You're typically out of the Lynnhaven Basin, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So you said you pushed south. How far south did you go before you started seeing those bigger numbers of fish?
So on this specific day, we honestly, I mean, they were the most fish we saw were realistically within a quarter mile of the Rudy Jetty. It was very surprising. I think we were joking. I think we were doubled up with Travis within 12 minutes of leaving the slip when we picked him up. Luckily, in years past, sometimes I go 10, 15, 20, 30 miles into you go down into Carolina to find the push coming up. Luckily this week, I think that Rudy water was an outgoing, and that warm water outside of the inlet had them they were just shooting right up. So we didn't have to go too far. I don't think we ever made it down to the pier, the Sandbridge Pier, but some days we go down a lot farther than that.
Yeah, and as a cobia fisher myself, there's days where you get out there and you just feel like you're just invincible, like the fish are eating this, that, and the other. But other days it makes you feel like you don't know your ass from your elbow when it comes to trying to get these things to bite. So to catch 43 fish, were you guys just in that invincibility mode, or were you doing something special to get them to bite? Like what was actually helping you get those hookups for those 43 fish?
So I think funny you mentioned that. The day before we went out, William and I went out, and we probably saw somewhere in the range of 100 fish and could only get 5 to bite. And then you go the next day, and granted, we saw a lot more than 100, but it was, we were just throwing, William and I got together and tied up a few bucktails and threw those, and they were chomping at the bit. Some of them are picky. I mean, this year, more than any year I've ever seen, even the drum don't want to eat. It's just weird. I don't know if it has to do with the water temps or the good weather down in Carolina that's had those fish maybe a little more pressured on the way up than normal. But, first fish I saw this year was on May 8th. I actually was on the phone with you right after that. And there's a pot of 6 fish, all alone, nobody within 5 miles. I mean, you put a bait right in front of them and they act like they've seen a ghost. So Hopefully that's not indicative of what the year is, but everything was going well. The southeast picked up, which usually has them biting a little better. Casts were good. Fish were hungry. A lot of pairs and triples, which, usually when there's more than one, they're a little bit easier to get to bite.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything more frustrating than seeing a jumbo jet of a fish that you're so excited to throw at, and then not even a sniff, just no interest whatsoever. So you mentioned you tied up a couple of jigs, any specific color and how many ounces?
So typically we throw anywhere from 1.5 to 3 ounces. 3 is on the heavier side. I think most times we probably use 2. That's probably the most popular, especially with like the boat up jigs that a lot of people are buying are mostly 2 ounces. Sometimes I like the 1.5 ounce when they're picky. They don't necessarily want to chase the bucktail as much. So that little bit of lack of vertical motion that the 1.5 ounce gives sometimes, that could be just thinking too far into it. In terms of color, I think for the most part, color catches fishermen. But, a lot of times we'll tie green and black, red and orange, I like a cotton candy jig, which is like a pinkish purple and blue. But yeah, we like tying pretty jigs and they look fun. Then you put them in a fish's mouth and half the hair comes out after one fish and they still eat it or they don't. So, but yeah, I like the natural jig. That one, I think sometimes when they're picky, I do think that could make a little bit of a difference. Just if they're keened in on like an eel or a natural style bait and you throw more of like a brownish, blackish white jig, that can sometimes make a difference. But I think a lot of it's in the presentation.
And then coming off that jig, how much leader material do you like to use? And are you a mono or a fluorocarbon guy?
I typically use 60-pound mono. I think as it gets pickier towards the end of the summer, if you throw in live baits and stuff, I have noticed, sometimes people use those. I think they're called BMCs, the big silver hooks, and I feel like I've seen fish turn off of those. So sometimes if they get picky, I think the fluoro could make a difference. But I use probably 2 to 3 feet of 60-pound mono, and then I run a 65-pound shock leader braid for about 15 feet, and then up to 30-pound braid mainline.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, I'm a little different. I'm 65-pound braid all the way back,
Yeah.
to the spool, but that's interesting. So about 30 feet or so of 65, and then to a 30-pound. And in your opinion, does that get you a longer cast?
I think the reason that we use the 65, I use it more just doing charters. Some of the people that we fish with aren't the most experienced, and I think that being able to have, if my main line's yellow, I'll put 15 feet or 30 feet of blue braid. So when I'm up in the tower and William's downstairs getting ready to net the fish and the blue line comes up, we're kind of ready. Hey, this fish is 20 feet away. Kind of like almost if you put a marker on your line. And when they get around the boat, if I'm throwing 30-pound main line, that 65-pound gives a little more abrasion resistance if they make a dart for the trim tabs or something.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then in terms of your rod and reel setup, what's your preference? Do you have one for live bait and then a different one for jig, or what's your setups look like?
Definitely. So my 2 setups that I mainly stick with are for the live bait, 5,000-6,000 Shimano Saragosa is my go-to for both live bait and jig. And then I use 7-foot medium heavy Terramars for live bait. And then actually a pretty good bang for your buck is the Talavera, the Shimano Talavera. They're I think the ones I have are 6.6 medium heavy. They're only like $100. I've been using them for the last few years, and man, I love them. They beat up on the fish. A lot of people love using big broomsticks with their jig rods. I can't cast quite as far as some of those big rods, but I've really enjoyed those. Now the new ones that come out with like the Talavera boat rods, William's got one of those, and we really like them.
That makes sense. And so, again, catching 43 fish, I'm not going to sit here and think that, you guys were just like dumb luck. That's some serious numbers for cobia. So how many single fish versus pods? Like when you say you caught 43 fish, how many total fish would you say roughly that you saw?
So I would say this year more than 2 years ago when we really hit the migration well. I think 2 years ago we saw more fish. They were more potted up, whereas this year it was a lot of singles and pairs, more than I would have expected. They just, when they wanted to turn on and bite, you'd hook one and and anybody else out there, sometimes you get lucky and the other one just sits with it. And a lot of times we would hook one that southeast was picking up, you turn around and the other one was sitting with it. And we had a lot of doubles and triple ups, a lot of small fish, but yeah, kind of surprising. We saw a lot of pods right off Rudy, like right when we first started. And then as we kind of pushed south and the day went on, it was mostly singles and pairs. I'd say conservatively, if you count every fish in a pod and pair as however many fish, I'd say we probably saw 300 or 400.
That's a lot of fish. So jigging style, I know everybody has a little bit different. What's in your opinion the most effective, way to jig a fish? When you throw at a fish, how are you working that jig through the water?
Yeah, so I think one way, especially if the fish are a little bit picky, I like to position the boat where you can kind of cross them off at a perpendicular or maybe a little bit more of an angle. So if the fish is swimming away from you, instead of pulling it straight towards their face, kind of
Hmm.
cutting it across their face a little bit. And a lot of times I'll kind of, instead of jigging, I'll more rip it past their face to get their attention. And then when they turn, if they don't immediately eat it, then you kind of slow down and start doing the traditional jigs. And one thing that I found, especially with the pickier fish, is that if they don't eat it immediately, instead of continuing to bring the jig towards the boat, kind of giving it some slack to let it sink a little bit, just slow it up. Just with the jig, especially if they're picky. I mean, the hardest part that I run into is that you just run out of room.
Hmm.
They're following it, and in my head, it's like if I had 20 more yards, I think they'd eat it. So a lot of times I'll sometimes even flip the bail and let the
Hmm.
jig sink 10 feet, close it and start jigging it again. And, sometimes you get a lot of luck with that because they're curious and they're swimming down towards the jig, and you close the bail and jig it up. And whether you catch them on the bottom jaw or they're sitting there with their mouth open, I seem to think they get curious and kind of get right over top of it. But everyone's got their own style. You watch some people jig it as hard as they can. Some people do a little flick. It's just kind of each person has developed their own confidence. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, the confidence, I think it was episode 2. Eric and I were Captain Eric on Heads and Tails were talking about inshore fishing, and kind of the takeaway was two things: fish it confidently and fish it all the way back to the boat. So like what you just said, very reminiscent of that, is the importance to fish it all the way back to the boat, because you never know when that fish is actually going to bite. And if you give up because it's only 10 or 15 yards away and it hasn't eaten yet, go ahead and drop that jig down, keep working it up and down the water column. You might still get that bite after all. And it's interesting too what you said about, making sure you're pulling it across the fish's face kind of perpendicular, or even at an angle, as opposed to directly, in opposite direction of them. I think fish are kind of inherently lazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if they got to work really hard for it, they're kind of less likely to work hard for it unless it's something that they really, really want to eat.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, man, that's exciting stuff to hear. 43 fish, what a day. What a way to start the season, get that. It's like stepping up to the first hole of golf course, and you just knock it to 2 feet and have a tap in
Yeah.
birdie. You're like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna
Totally.
shoot par today or better. You feel like you're on top of the world. So Captain Jack, 43 fish. It's obviously middle of May. The kill season doesn't start until June 15th, where we can only harvest two. Only one over 50 inches and two total over 40 inches. That's a lot of fish to catch and then release. What's your method for a safe release for these cobia? It's super important. How do you guys do it?
Yeah, I think that one crucial thing that we were doing that day specifically is, especially if you're hooking more than one at a time, I think that we're all guilty of it in a way, but especially when you get into a drum school or something, you get two, three, four on the line and you find yourself with one on the deck of the boat while you're trying to net the others. And especially on camera, it doesn't look great. It's not great for the fish. I think drum are resilient and they'll swim off. But with the cobia, I mean, they come in green and they bang their head against the side of the boat. And if you don't take good care of them, they will just sink to the bottom. So a lot of what we did is, if I'm fighting one and William's fighting one, we net mine, leave it in the water, let it kind of catch its breath, net the other one, pull them both in, get the hooks out quick. I'm part of the Virginia tagging program, so we try and tag as many as we can. But if a fish is bleeding or gets beat up, we just try and get it back as fast. One main thing that we do is I've got those fish grippers. I don't know what the proper name is, but they're orange and they lock in. And I tie that to like a 10-foot rope, and
Ah,
I'll tie that off on a cleat and leave it just in idle speed. Sometimes you hold them in your hand and the fish is freaking out, and right as it gets in the water, it shakes and gets off, and who knows if that thing was properly released. I think that it was especially good with the small fish. Get them in quick, don't take a picture, hold their tail if they need to, if they're freaking out, shoot them head first and send them on their way. But with the big fish, you know, unconsciously you take longer you're excited, you get the big fish in the boat, you want to take pictures. But if you don't hold it in the water or put it on the grips, it's just going to sink to the bottom. And if you can't keep it, you just got to do what you can to try and avoid that. So even if the fishing's good, even if you're excited, take that extra 1, 2, 3 minutes, enjoy it. We don't catch fish that are 58, 59, 60 inches all that often. Don't rush to try and catch the next fish. Put it on the grips. One trick that I do, I don't know if there's any science behind this, but I've found it over the last few years. If you take your hand and rub it over their eyes when they're in the water, you got the grip on them or your hand, and they're just sitting there and you're like, I don't know if they have any life. If you just kind of almost aggressively like rub the top of their head and a lot of times they'll start freaking out, and then you kind of know that they're gaining some green back. I don't think there's any science behind that, but I've found that if you rub their head and they don't freak out, don't let go of them because they're not ready to swim off yet.
When you're rubbing their head, you like tell them they're a good boy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for playing. Sorry we can't put you in the grease, but see you in a couple weeks.
Lots of positive affirmations.
Yeah.
You did a great job. Yeah. Great fight.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's a great tip. I think I saw one of your stories. There was like 3 in your net at a time. So it's like, yes, it's exciting to catch multiple fish, but don't neglect your responsibility to take care of those fish. Keep them in the net in the water, put them on the fish grips, keep them in the water. And hey, if there's like a 3rd or 4th fish on, don't be afraid to loosen that drag and just properly take care of the other fish, before you get those other fish in. That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Captain Jack, thank you so much for that report and that detail. Really helpful for the listeners out there that are targeting these fish to understand a little bit of the tips and tricks of how they can do a little bit better on their next trip. But if folks want to get up with you and fish on the king tide, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you and book a trip?
Yeah, so best way would probably be through Instagram, and that's at kingtide_charters. If you shoot me a private message, I'll get back to you hopefully within 24 hours. If not, my phone's always open. That's 757-687-9973. And then I also have a website, which is www.kingtidecharter.com. And you can go on there and send me a message through there as well. I'll be running kind of select trips this summer as I'm starting work, but pretty much up until July 4th, I'll be doing every day. Still got plenty of availability. And then after that, I'll be trying to do as many weekends as possible. So I'd love to get up with y'all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Captain Jack. Folks, that's going to wrap up a really great and exciting report about some hot cobia fishing here in the Chesapeake Bay. We're going to take one more break, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what we learned today. Fish bites. Whether you're hitting the bay to catch bait fish using the traditional scent strips or fishing the rivers or marshes for speckled trout, red drum, and flounder, Fish Bites has something for you. Family owned and operated in St. Augustine, Florida, they pride themselves on making reliably consistent fishing products for anglers of all ages around the world. Fish Bites baits and lures are made with pride in the Sunshine State, USA. Check out the full line of scented saltwater and freshwater baits at fishbites.com. All right, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about what we learned today. It was really intriguing to listen to Captain Jake Bolts talk about their whale research. And we said we'd put it in the show notes, and we will. But we did also find them on Facebook. So anybody that is curious, it is the Mid-Atlantic Whale Monitoring Project. And man, it's some neat stuff to check out. All the different species of whales that they track, the types of devices that they use. And, we always talk about fishing on this show, but, whales are very much part of that same ecosystem. And I don't know much about what they're doing, but I have to imagine if you can begin to understand some of the data and science that causes, whales to migrate and move around, that there's probably some similarities or some nuggets that could be learned that you could apply to, watching whatever species you target. And understand more about that migration. So really cool to hear that Captain Jake and the Flying Fish are assisting those researchers with that. And it was just really cool to picture this moving boat, moving target, and then you got a guy with a crossbow that's taking that shot to plant that satellite tag. And man, what a cool thing that is. And then again, just a quick recap. We've got that Big Man's Cobia Bonanza coming up in August 15th through 17th. Find them on Facebook, Instagram. And if you want to talk with Captain Sean about becoming a sponsor of this awesome event, you can reach out to him at seanshapiro07@gmail.com. And then getting introduced to Captain Jack Limroth with King Tide Charters. I really enjoyed talking with him and hearing his different strategies for targeting cobia. But goodness gracious, I just can't imagine what it would be like to catch 43 cobias in one day. What an amazing experience that must have been. But something that he said that really stood out to me was the idea of how he does his leader setup with, that mono leader. I think he said 60 pounds. And then he goes to a 65-pound braid of a different color, like blue, and then to his main braid line of 30 pounds, which, that was really pretty ingenious to think about doing that. So when you've got multiple fish being fought, or even in the case of one fish being fought, that you're able to, as the captain, look down and you see, blue leader, for example, not leader, but blue main line, and you're within, 20 feet or 30 feet of your leader based on how much you tied on. So I thought that was a really cool takeaway to understand from Captain Jack. Each one of these captains we talk to, they're out there doing this every single day, and they develop all kinds of unique tips and tricks that allow them to be, effective, safe, and then obviously, produce. So I think it's just a great reminder for any folks listening that are, looking to book a trip with one of these captains. These guys are consummate professionals. They're out there doing it every day. And when you invest your money to go out there and take an adventure with one of the guys that we've been talking to, you can hear them chat and talk about what they do. You're in good hands, and that there's a good chance they're going to put you on some fish. And if not, they're going to give it hell to get you one. So yeah, folks, it's been an awesome show today. I've loved getting to talk to these guys. And like we've said in the last week or two, fishing is heating up. I've seen reports of Spanish mackerel. I've seen bonito being caught by Captain Bill Pappas. Tons of red drum schools. The cobias are showing up all throughout the bay. It's here. Summer is here. It almost seems like it's here a couple of weeks early, like we've been saying. So get out there and catch some fish. Call up one of our captains, book a trip. Hope you guys have a great week and had a very safe Memorial Day weekend. So that's going to wrap it up this week. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, to get your free AFTCO Camo Sunglasses Cleaning Cloth, just text the acronym LCBFR to 779-345-2918 to get your promo code and be added to our email list so we can send you the new show each week. You guys keep whacking them and be safe out there.